If you liked the video, feel free to subscribe. We have battle reports, list videos, and other Warhammer 40K content. Thanks for watching, thanks for stopping by. This video is a full overview of the brand new Adeptus Custodes detachment, Lions of the Emperor. This detachment was released with the March 2025 balance update. The detachment is more high skilled, but it looks to be very powerful when played right. We are going to take a look at the Detachment Rule, Enhancements, and the Stratagems. Discuss how we could use these rules to our advantage and what Custodes units benefit the most from the Lions of the Emperor detachment in a top unit section for the detachment. I have included 4 lists, 3 of them are 2,000 point lists and 1 of them is a 1,000 point list. I have used one of these 2,000 points lists against the Orcs in a 2,000 point game. Now, on to the detachment overview. I want to talk a little bit about the normal shield captain on foot, and I want to throw this out here so I'm not mentioning it all throughout the video. In my opinion, this is one of the worst characters for the detachment. That does not mean they are bad, they are still a very potent unit. It has 2 abilities, the Strategic Mastery to reduce the cost of a stratagem by 1 CP, that is great in this detachment. The other lets us use both Martial Catal abilities once per game, giving his unit Sustain Hits 1 and Lethal Hits. You combine that with an enhancement to give the shield captain even more attacks for some insane output of damage. Sadly, melee damage is not really what we're lacking in the Custodes, making this ability not really worth taking over an Allarus or a Bike Captain. The Custodian Guard do not need a character attached to access their rerolls. We also have Trajan and the Blade Champion pair well with the Custodian Guard, and we can use a character's once per game ability twice in this detachment with a stratagem for 1 CP, so we have to keep that in mind when we're comparing our Custodes characters, because the fact that we can use 2 of the once per game abilities really does make a difference when you're selecting your characters. That's my spiel about the shield captain on foot. Still a very potent unit, just not quite as good as some of the other selections we can take in this detachment. Let's start this detachment overview proper by going through the Adeptus Custodes army rule and then the rules for the Lions of the Emperor detachment. For our army rule, we have Martial Kata. Each time a unit from your army is selected to fight, we can select one of these Kata stances as long as we have that Martial Kata ability on our datasheet. The first one is Dakatari stance, and this will give our melee weapons the Sustain Hits 1 ability, or Rendak stance to give our melee weapons the Lethal Hits ability. And it's a great army rule to boost our melee damage potential. If we'll be wounding on a 4+ or less, pick Sustain Hits 1. If wounding on a 5 or 6, Lethal Hits is the better option. And this is going to pair very well with our detachment rule and a lot of these rules in this detachment. So we have the Lions of the Emperor detachment rule against all odds. Each time an Adeptus Custodes unit from your army, excluding vehicles, makes an attack, if there's no friendly units within 6 inches of that unit, add 1 to the hit roll and add 1 to the wound roll. Now this is a detachment rule with some real potential. Some really important things to notice about this detachment rule is that this is each time an Adeptus Custodes unit makes an attack, meaning this is not phase locked, so you can use this on Overwatch and other abilities that you're using on your opponent's turn. And this works on our shooting and our melee attacks. And this also works on Custodes and Psychono units, but not vehicles. And we do have to be outside of 6 inches of other Custodes units. Unit placement will really make a difference in this detachment. Now that we have the basics, why is against the odds so good? +1 to hit will not come up all the time. It will help against those -1 to hit abilities or even factions like Death Guard. It really helps any Imperial agents such as Inquisitors or Inquisitor Draxus joined with a Custodian Guard, since they will be a Custodes unit and get that +1 to hit and +1 to wound. +1 to hit isn't as helpful, but +1 to wound, now this is brutal. The thing to keep in mind is that this is our shooting as well. A lot of our shooting is strength 4, AP 1, damage 2. With +1 to wound, it will really make a difference with our shooting attacks. +1 to wound is a big boost to our overall damage. I don't think it beats the pure melee output of the Shield Host detachment. The shooting potential is much better in the Lions of the Emperor detachment than the Shield Host detachment. It also gives us a reason to take some of our units we've not seen much on the tabletop since our Codex was released. Units who can reroll wounds can output some scary amount of damage in this detachment. Even as smaller MSU units, the +1 to wound really cranks out the output of these units. The Allarus Terminators are very good in this detachment, even in small units. Next, let's take a look at the 4 enhancements for the Lines of the Emperor. Our first one is Ad Moda Mortis, and this is Shield Captain model only. Improve the strength of the melee weapons equipped by the bearer by 3, and improve the armor penetration and the damage of those weapons by 1. This enhancement turns a Shield Captain's damage up to 11, plus 3 strength, plus 1 AP and damage, add just the right amount of stats to our Custodes weapons. The Guardian Spear goes up to strength 10, AP 3, damage 3, and that can one-shot Terminators. It also will only drop to damage 2 against those -1 or half damage targets such as Deathwing Knights, and AP 3 is rare on our Custodes weapon profiles unless we're playing Shield Host to boost our overall AP by 1. The Castellan Axe goes to strength 12, AP 2, damage 4, and you combine it with the Detachment Rule for +1 to the wound. The Shield Captain becomes a Knight and Primarch killer. The AP2 does make it a bit less reliable into those Armor of Content 2+ save vehicle profiles. I can't help but try taking the Axe for my first few games. The last weapon profile available is the Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle Jet Bikes and Scepter Lance, with 6 attacks, strength 10, AP 3, damage 3 with the Lance ability. That is a scary profile for anything under T12, and even toughness 12 vehicles we will wound on a 4+. The Lance has 6 attacks, the Axe will have 6 attacks, and the Guardian Spear will have 7 attacks. This enhancement on a Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle Jet Bike is great for adding some anti-elite infantry damage with some real threat to enemy monsters and vehicles. The Lance ability allows us to still have that +1 to the wound roll if we've charged that turn, even though we might have some Custodes units within 6 inches. You combine that with the Martial Catal and shots from the captain or his unit. A unit of Shield Captains with 2 or 3 Virtus Praetors can threaten almost any unit in the game. My personal pick, however, has been the Shield Captain in the Allarus Terminator. This unit is nightmare fuel in this detachment. There are so many ways in this detachment to make an Allarus Shield Captain feel like a super elite infantry unit. 7 attacks at strength 10, AP 3, damage 3, or 6 attacks at strength 12, AP 2, damage 4. Join the Allarus Captain with a 2-mana Allarus Custodian unit to access reroll the wounds into character, monster, or vehicle units, then +1 to the hit roll and wound roll from the Detachment Rule. I did 34 damage to a Gorkanaut with the Axe Captain and 2 Axe Allarus. The Axe Captain did 16 damage and the Allarus did 18 damage. So they were able to one-shot a Gorkanaut, so there is some real damage potential, even with a small 3-model unit. The next enhancement is Fierce Conqueror. This is also Shield Captain model only. At the start of the fight phase until the end of the phase, add 2 to the attacks of melee weapons equipped by the bearer for every 5 enemy models within 6 inches of the bearer, rounding down. This is more of a situational enhancement. Depending on the unit and the opponent, this could be broken amazing or just useful. I would prefer this on a Bike Captain or possibly even a normal on-foot Shield Captain attached to Custodian Guard. I know I said they're not the best, but with this combination you really can crank out some damage, so it is worth playing with, but I still think the other Shield Captains are better. I like the Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle for its bigger base size, since it is 6 inches within the bearer, not 6 inches of the bearer's unit. The Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle has the speed to get further into enemy lines, into a horde army like Orcs, Tyranids, or Guard, or even a Necrons with an infantry heavy list. When charging into a 20-man unit, that could add 8 extra attacks, maybe even more with great movement and with some other enemy units around. Since it does not state units within engagement range, only units within 6 inches. So with the right placement and the right opponent, we could have a Shield Captain pushing 15 to 20 attacks with the 6 attacks from the Interceptor Lance and a bunch of extra attacks from this Fierce Conqueror enhancement. Next up is Presidius, Adeptus Custodes model only. The bearer has the Lone Operative and Stealth abilities. I love this enhancement. In fact, I love all of these enhancements. This gives us something I feel we've really been lacking, our own Custodes Lone Op model. The Calidus Assassin is a great tech piece, but it does not have the same board presence and strength as a Custodes character model. Lone Op and Stealth for -1 to hit against enemy ranged attacks. And like I said, most of this detachment, the normal on-foot Shield Captain, is probably the worst choice for this. The Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle is a fantastic choice for this enhancement. It gives us a turn 1 model to grab objectives or do some turn 1 secondary actions. Unless the enemy can get within 12 inches of this unit in turn 1, the Shield Captain should be safe from enemy ranged attacks. It does not have the Deep Strike ability, thus I would probably start this unit on the board. both of the Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle's abilities, the once per game free move after combat, and reduce a stratagem by 1. It does not need a unit attached to them to access it. This makes it a great lone op character. The Blade Champion makes a very dangerous lone op character that can advance and charge once per game. My favorite though is the Allarus Shield Captain. Put the Allarus Shield Captain in Deep Strike, bring it down in the enemy lines in turn 2 or turn 3, and we could even use rapid ingress if we need to. The lone op will make it much harder for the enemy to shoot this unit to death. And even if they can, we can use the Auramite and Adamantine ability to reduce all incoming damage to 1 for the phase. Use 1 CP to be able to use this ability twice per game. The last enhancement is Superior Creation. Adeptus Custodes infantry model only. The first time the bearer is destroyed, roll 1d6, and at the end of the phase on a 2+, set the bearer back up on the battlefield, as close as possible to where it was destroyed and not within engagement range of 1 or more enemy units with its full wounds remaining. The fact that the character gets up on a 2+ with full wounds remaining is awesome. Once again, the normal Shield Captain would not be my first choice, nor the Blade Champion. A Bike Captain with toughness 7 and 8 wounds, or the Allarus Shield Captain with toughness 7 and 7 wounds, and their ability to use their once per game abilities twice, I look to these 2 units for this enhancement. Having one of these come back to life with full wounds is a problem for the opponent. And that's the enhancements. Let's move on to the stratagems. And here are the 6 stratagems for the Lines of the Emperor. They're not quite as good as the enhancements. I think the enhancements are the best in all of our detachments, but still they are some great stratagems. Our first stratagem is Defiant to the Last. For 1 CP in the fight phase, 1 Adeptus Custodes unit. Each time a model from your unit is destroyed, if that model has not fought this phase, you can fight on death on a 2+ if you're a character model, or a 4+ if you are not a character model. We may not have any fights first stratagems or abilities besides Alea. This does give us a weapon against melee units. It is a 4+, and with characters a 2+. A Shield Captain can make this cost 0 CP. A lot of the time when our units get charged, they are hoping to wipe out our units or kill enough models to make our attack back much less potent. I used this on a 4-man Custodian Guard when being charged by the Orcs. I had 2 Custodian Guard left after the Orcs attack, so I lost 2 of them, and then I did roll a double 4 on those 2 dead Custodian Guard. And then I proceeded to kill that entire Orc unit in return. Also fantastic on solo characters, giving them around a 84% chance to fight back on death. Even better on a Superior Creation enhancement character to use Fight on Death twice a game. Superior Creation says set back up on the battlefield on a 2+, meaning we remove it from the battlefield before we roll to stand it back up. And this is important since Defiant to the Last, our Fight on Death, is used before the model is removed from the battlefield. This allows us to potentially use this stratagem twice on the same model. It would have to be on a different turn on a different phase, but it still gives us that ability to fight back on death. And this can be used to go on the offensive too. Have a character left on 1 wound with a scary fights first target in front of it, charge right in and use this stratagem to fight on death. And with luck, we can take that unit out. And this is also great on that Ad Monte Mortis enhanced character, or even better, Trajan Valorous. Have him at 1 or 2 wounds left, charge in, use his Moment Shackle ability to double his attacks up to 12 attacks, strength 10, AP 2, damage 3. The Detachment Rule can give him +1 to the wound rule as well, and if he dies, we have used this stratagem to make sure we do get those 12 attacks off. We do have to use this at the start of the fight phase, so we can't wait until he dies and then use it, but if your character only has a few wounds left and it looks like he's going to die, it is a good time to pop this stratagem. Next up is Gilded Champion, and this is another great stratagem. Any phase just after Adeptus Custodes model from your army has used an ability on its datasheet that states it can only be used once per battle. And what this does is your model can use that once per battle ability 1 additional time during this battle, but just not in the same phase. This does have a restriction. You cannot use this on the same Adeptus Custodes character model more than once per battle. Now this stratagem puts the Orc Champion's Superhuman Reserves to shame. Superhuman Reserves is 2 CP and Warlord only once per game. This is 1 CP, any character, and once per character, so you can use this on multiple characters throughout the game. This may not seem strong at first, and it really depends on the characters in our list. Some characters give me fear that this could be nerfed, or certain characters could get a point increase. I know, talking about nerfs already, but it is something we should be aware of. As we touched on, the normal shield captain can be an absolute blender with the right setup. Being able to push the damage twice per game can be a very powerful tool. I just think we can replicate that damage or close to it with some better combinations. The Blade Champion does seem like a great target for this too. If you do take a Blade Champion in your list, of course use this. I would not take a Blade Champion just for this stratagem though. A second use of Advance and Charge would come up less than I would like. Usually once we've made that first big charge to get into the middle, most of the time it is just a regular charge move to get in range of most of the other enemy units. You may guess a pattern here. The shield captain on Dawn Eagle can use his once per game move after the fight phase as long as this unit has fought this phase, engagement range or not. And being able to do this twice per game is some fantastic extra movement. Even more so if you have that shield captain attached to some Virtus Praetors to give those bikes some extra movement as well. We can even use Strategic Mastery to make this cost 0 CP. Using one of the best movement abilities twice per game is a win in my books. Once again, my Allarus bias might be kicking in, but the Allarus Shield Captain is a menace with this stratagem. Their once per game ability is Oromite and Amantine to turn all incoming damage 1 for the phase, and this can make just one Allarus Captain an absolute anvil. If we have an Allarus Captain with that Presidium enhancement giving him Lone Op and Stealth, dropping it in the enemy backlines can be a huge problem for our opponent. And Lone Op makes it untargetable unless the enemy is within 12 inches. This way, when the enemy purposely moves within that 12 inches, we know for sure that the enemy plan on shooting that Allarus Shield Captain. So we use that Oromite and Amantine to reduce all damage to 1, and then the stratagem Gilded Champion for 1 CP, or even 0 CP using Strategic Mastery. So now we have 2 uses of that reduce all damage to 1. We are also going to have -1 to hit to ranged attacks from that Presidius enhancement, giving the bearer stealth. It's going to be hard to kill that Allarus Shield Captain with ranged, and then if they charge it, we use that ability to reduce all the damage down to 1 again, and just make this thing a nightmare to take out. Next up is Maneuver and Fire for 1 CP in your movement phase just after an Adeptus Custodes unit from your army has fell back, and this gives you Fall Back, Shoot, and Charge. Fall Back, Shoot, and Charge, I love this stratagem in any of our detachments. It makes tying up our units much harder. Fall Back, Shoot, and Charge adds some psychological warfare to our list. The opponent may not want to charge our units with chaff, meant to tie them up, or even attempt to chip away a few models if we can just use Defiant to the last to fight on death and fall back and shoot with this stratagem. I have played a game against the Orcs and a few practice matches against myself so far, and I've found that yes, we do burn through our CP, but it is not as CP hungry as other detachments. The detachment gives us lots of reasons to take a shield captain, and those shield captains can save us a potential 5 CP over a game, so really we have 15 CP to play with over the course of a game. I find the Talons of the Emperor and the Solar Spearhead much more CP starved than this detachment, leaving us more CP for stratagems like Fall Back, Shoot, and Charge. In most of our detachments, it's only the Fall Back and Charge we care about. A lot of our other detachments do have Fall Back, Shoot, and Charge, but unlike other detachments, the +1 to wound to our shooting becomes a real threat. Fall Back and then Shoot is even better in this detachment. Inquisitor Draxus with the Custodian Guard are happy to see this stratagem. Same for the Allarus or the Virtus Praetors. Next is Peerless Warrior for 1 CP in the fight phase, 1 Adeptus Custodes unit. All melee weapons equipped by models in that unit have the Precision ability. This will be the least used stratagem in the detachment. If we really want to nuke a character off the board that is hidden inside a tough unit, Peerless Warrior is the answer. Precision to all melee weapons to an entire Custodes unit, there are not many characters that can be joined to a unit that can survive this. It is not a stratagem that will come up often, but if you're playing Necrons with some Necron race with a Technomancer, goodbye Technomancer. Have some Blood Angel Death Company with a Chaplain in the unit, not anymore, Chaplain's gone and they'll lose their OC. There is some situations to use this stratagem that just won't come up as often as we would like. Swift as an Eagle for 1 CP in your opponent's shooting phase just after an enemy unit has shot 1 Adeptus Custodes from your army, excluding vehicles. Your unit can make a normal move up to D6 inches. This is another great stratagem. It will require precise unit model placement to truly take advantage of. It is a D6 movement, meaning it's going to be random what you're going to get. Planning out a 1 to 2 inch movement to be in some line of sight cover or steal an objective will be key. Making a battle plan, relying on big 5 or 6 rolls on the dice, will get us in really bad situations. It also could be used when the last enemy unit able to shoot a particular unit to move d6 inches towards the enemy for an easier charge in our turn or even steal an objective. But just make sure you're not moving out so you can be shot by even more units that could not see you before. This is a stratagem we may not get to use every single turn, but it has the potential for some really big plays, and as shield captains can make this 0 CP if we really need to save this unit from some more incoming ranged attacks. The Allarus are great in this detachment, but they do only have a 5 inch move, and this can be used to gain some extra movement out of our deadly but slow Allarus. And while not as good as the Talents of the Emperor Talent Pincer Stratagem for reactive 6 inch move, but it is a much needed movement trick for the Custodes, and I'm happy to have it in this detachment. The last of our 6 stratagems is Unleash the Lions. In your command phase, one Allarus Custodians or Aquilon Custodian units from your army that is on the battlefield, that unit is split into separate units, each containing 1 model. And these units each have a starting strength of 1. And that's not your wounds, that is starting strength. When someone's shooting at you, you're at full strength, so if you lose a wound, you'll be at below starting strength. And then we're at 1 wound, you'll be at below half strength. So that's how it works. You don't start at 1 wound, it's just your unit strength for those rules that do interact with unit strength. This stratagem has the fun factor. Breaking up our Allarus into smaller units is something no other detachment offers. And so far it seems, as long as we have not used the Allarus Golden Light for the uppy downy, we will have it available for those new 1 model units. Now taking 3 big 6-man units of Terminators and then splitting them up between different Allarus units who can teleport around the board will cause chaos. Although I don't think this is the way to go. I think this is better used in the late game but with smaller units. +1 to the wound on a big 5-man unit of Allarus with rerolls will kill nearly anything in the game. Smaller units might be the play, and we'll find that out coming up in the next few weeks. I like the idea of a 3-man unit breaking up in turn 4 to score some late game secondary points. Turn 4 so I can still put them in reserves with Golden Light if that Golden Light is still available. So at the end of the opponent's turn, you get to pick them back up and still have turn 5 to bring them down the boards. And since this is a reposition move, you can still put them in reserves and bring them down in turn 5 with Deep Strike. Another problem I can see of breaking into a bunch of 1 model units is the against all odds detachment rule. It will make it much harder to be outside of 6 inches of other units when the board is full of Allarus Terminators. The enhancement and the stratagems are great, but if we're not actively trying to engage with the +1 to hit and wound detachment rule, we might as well play the Shield Host detachment for that flat +1 to AP or crits on 5 detachment rule. What about those Aquilon Terminators, aka our Forge World Terminators? They are the same price as our plastic Allarus Terminators at 65 points a model, but they do come in either 3 or 6 model units, so 195 points for 3 or 390 points for 6. They do have the same basic characteristic as the Allarus: movement 5, toughness 7, 4 wounds, 2 up save with a 4 up invulnerable, 6 leadership, and an OC of 2. They do have Golden Light, but their other ability is a range attack, reroll wounds of 1 into the closest eligible target, with a worse range profile than the Allarus, since the Allarus have the spear and the ballistic grenade launcher they get to shoot. Long story short, these are not good, and they are not worth taking over the Allarus Terminators. Let's go over some of the Lines of the Emperor best units. For our characters, we have the Shield Captain and Allarus. This is my favorite pick for a Custodes character unit. 3 of the enhancements really make this unit shine. They hit very hard in melee, even more so with that Ad Monte Mortis enhancement. The Ormite and Adamantine ability pairs well with that Gilded Champion stratagem to use it twice per game. It makes a lone up Allarus Shield Captain very hard to deal with. All of these good stratagems can be reduced to 0 CP, a free 2+ fight on death. Sign me up. I like to pair them with a 2 model Allarus Terminator unit for a small but very deadly unit. Using Gilded Champion for 0 CP to reset his once per game ability is such a great feeling. The Adamantine Mortis Axe Shield Captain with 2 Allarus can charge Angron or Fulgrim with a real chance of surviving for multiple turns. 6 attacks with strength 12, AP 2, damage 4 with +1 to wound and then sustain hits 1 or lethal, and then a possible reroll the wound roll and the Allarus attacks on top of that. And with all those attacks, I can't say the same about our target surviving. In my game against the Orcs, I did deal 34 damage to a Gorkanaut with a Shield Captain and 2 Allarus with the Castellan Axes. I did get lucky and he did fail quite a bit of saves, but that is still a crazy amount of damage for a 3 model unit. Next up, we have the Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle. With so many good stratagems, a Shield Captain seems like a great tech piece for the reduced stratagem cost. Gilded Champion allows us to use our best movement ability twice per game, even more powerful with a unit of 2 or 3 Virtus Praetors attached. The Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle won't benefit from the +1 to the wound when they've made a charge, since they have their lance ability on their melee weapons, which gives them +1 to the wound roll when they've charged that turn. +1 to the wound on ranged weapons pairs well with their twin-linked ranged attacks. A great target for Presidius to get a lone-op Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle. Then we have Trajan Valorous, Trey. What a good feeling to actually put Trajan in a list. He is still not the powerhouse that he was in the Index Custodes days. He was stuff of legend. With this set of rule set though, he is finally viable in a Custodes list. He could even be ran as a solo beatstick. I would prefer him in some Wardens or Custodian Guard though, but that is an option. With Fight on Death on a 2+ from the Defiant to the last stratagem and a way to use Moment Shackle twice per game with Gilded Champion, there's a lot of things you can do with Trey. And Moment Shackle has to be used at the start of the fight phase, giving Trajan either a 2+ invulnerable or 12 attacks. Meaning if he is low on wounds, we could use this and the Fight on Death stratagem to make sure he gets his 12 attacks off. If he is charged when he has full wounds or close to it by a big hard-hitting but low amount of attacks unit, you may want to pop that 2+ invulnerable to survive, use Gilded Champion to be able to use Moment Shackle again, and then in our turn we can use Maneuver and Fire to fall back and charge, and then use that Moment Shackle for 12 attacks this time. So having the access to use Moment Shackle twice really makes a difference for Trajan, especially in this detachment where it only costs 1 CP. You can't use this in the same phase. You can't get the 2+ invulnerable and then swing back with 12 attacks. You have to survive until the next fight phase to use Moment Shackle again. Now I have 2 Custodes non-character units that I really think shine in this detachment. The Allarus Terminators, my wish came true, a detachment the Allarus are great in. The +1 to the wound roll and the shooting in the melee from the Detachment Rule really makes this unit shine. They get to shoot with both their Guardian Spear or Castellan Axe, along with those Ballistus grenade launchers with +1 to the wound roll. They have an ability, Slayer of Tyrants, to re-roll the wound roll against character, vehicle, or monster units. And so far, I like the smaller 2 to 3 man units attached to an Allarus Shield Captain. The damage output between the shooting and the melee with +1 to the wound makes for these small but very deadly units. And it's easier to be outside that 6 inches for the Detachment Rule if you have these smaller units, and Unleashed Alliance for 1 CP is great for the late game to split these up for some late game secondary scoring. I would not recommend using this to break up into a bunch of different units turn 1. There's no need for 12 to 18 different Allarus units. Wait to turn 4, turn 5 to break these up to do some late game secondary. Next up is the Custodian Guard, another unit we have not seen on the board en masse since the 10th edition Custodes Index. You may have noticed this is another unit that has access to reroll wounds. And this is going to be key for taking advantage of our Detachment Rule against all odds for +1 to the hit and +1 to the wound roll. The Custodian Guard received a points buff. A 4 model unit is now 170 points, and a 5 model unit is now 250 points. So that is a 10-point decrease for either a 4 model unit or a 5 model unit. And just like the other top units, they will love a 4+ Fight on Death stratagem, Swift as an Eagle for a reactive D6 move after being shot, and Maneuver and Fire is fantastic on the Custodian Guard. Being able to shoot with these in charge with a possible +1 to the wound roll can really throw out some great damage. Then we can use their Sentinel Storm to shoot twice, once per game. So a 4 model unit, depending on their loadout, gives them 8 shots, hitting on 2s, strength 4, AP 1, damage 2, and Sentinel Storm will give us a total of 16 shots with that possible +1 to the hit and +1 to the wound from the Detachment Rule. Having Custodian Guard, Allarus, or Virtus Praetors adds a lot of potential range damage. As promised, I do have 4 lists here. We'll start with the 1000 points list. Our Warlord is a shield captain in Allarus with a superior creation enhancement, and that will allow him to get up on a 2+ with full wounds remaining, and that will make a difference on these small 1000 point games, getting pretty much an extra 130 points. For our other character, we have a shield captain on Dawn Eagle with the Presidious enhancement, making him lone op and stealth. For the battle line, we have a unit of 4 custodian guards, 3 with the spears and 1 with the Vexilla, and this will be used to hold our expansion objective. We have a unit of 3 Allarus with guardian spears, and we have a unit of 2 Allarus with guardian spears, and I'm going to join that captain with the 2 Allarus unit, just to allow me to have 2 units of 3 Allarus bodies on the board. 2 units of prosecutors, 1 for holding the home objective, the other for some secondary scoring. And then finally, for our ally unit, we have Inquisitor Draxus to join to the Custodian Guard to have her hitting on 2s, rerolling her wounds hopefully, fishing for those anti-infantry 4 devastating wounds. Next up is our 3 2000 points list. Our first one is Lions of War, the list that I played against the Orcs, and this is the list I'm going to focus on. I like the Allarus, so I'm going to try to make them work in this detachment. For our Warlord, we do have Trajan Valoris. For our other characters, we do have 3 shield captains in the Allarus Terminator armor. All 3 of them have enhancements. I do have one with the Castellan Axe, and he has the Ad Monte Mortis enhancement. Another has the Superior Creation enhancement for a 2+ stand back up on death with full wounds remaining. Finally, we do have a shield captain who I'm going to run solo with the Presidious enhancement, giving him lone op and stealth, and those 2 will have guardian spears. For our battle line, we have 2 units of 4 custodian guard, 3 with guardian spears, and 1 with a sword and board for each of those units, and then we do have a unit of 4 guardian spears. For our other data sheets, we have 2 units of 2 Allarus. 2 of them have the Castellan Axe to join with our shield captain with the axe. The other 2 have guardian spears to join with that superior creation shield captain. I do have a unit of 5 custodian wardens. Yes, they are more expensive, but I like having a nice tough unit to put Trajan in, and Trajan makes that unit much more threatening on the table. And then I have a unit of 2 Virtus Praetors with the Hurricane Bolters. And for our Psychonia units, we have 2 units of 4 prosecutors and a unit of 4 Witch Seekers. My allied unit, I did bring Inquisitor Draxus again to join up with one of those custodian guard units with the 3 spears and the sword and shield. And this is a list I played against the Orcs using their new Daka detachment, and I was able to win that game, so I probably will stick with this list. I may have to make a few tweaks here and there. I don't know about the Virtus Praetors, we'll see about that, but still, this is a list I'm going to be running for now. Next up is a 2000 point list that comes to 1995 points, and this one is called Bikes and Boots. For Warlord, we have a shield captain on Dawn Eagle with the Ad Monte Mortis enhancement with a salvo launcher equipped. We also have 2 other shield captains with enhancements. The first one has Fierce Conqueror to try to get some extra attacks, and the other has the Presidious enhancement to give him lone op and stealth. All 3 of those shield captains do have salvo launchers. You could put Hurricane Bolters on these. I'm just going to try salvo launchers for now. For a battle line, we have 3 units of 4 custodian guard, 3 with spears, 1 with the sword and board in each one of those units. And then we do have another 3 units of 4 custodian guard. All 3 of those units have 4 guardian spears in each of the units. For other data sheets, we have 2 units of 2 Virtus Praetors with these salvo launchers, and both of those will join the shield captains. The only one that will not have a unit attached will be our lone op shield captain. 2 units of 4 prosecutors, and for our ally unit, Inquisitor Draxus to join up with one of those custodian guard units to give her some extra punch in the shooting phase. My final lines of the Emperor list is an anti-tank list, and this one comes to 2000 points. Our 3 shield captains on Dawn Eagles with those 3 exact same enhancements. For a battle line, we have 2 units of 4 custodian guard, 3 with spears, 1 with sword and board in each one of those units, and then a unit of 5 custodian guard, 4 with spears, and 1 with the Vexilla. For other data sheets, we do have 2 Caladius Grav tanks, and this is for those people who still want to run some Caladius Grav tanks in the list, and they will have the Twin Arachnus Heavy Blaze Cannons equipped. 2 units of 2 Virtus Praetors with these salvo launchers, and they will join the shield captains that are not the lone operative. Finally, 3 units of 4 prosecutors and Inquisitor Draxus to join up with that big 5-man custodian guard unit. So those are my lists. I won't go through a big breakdown of these lists. We'll wait till we actually do some list videos where we actually break down why I took all these units. My mindset for these lists is to take advantage of the detachment rule, try to get shots, try to get reroll wounds and some big damage with these smaller units, while also making sure I'm outside of 6 inches of my other unit. Remember though that the Caladius grav tanks will not get the +1 to hit and +1 to the wound because they are vehicle units and the detachment rule excludes vehicles. Let's finish the video with some final thoughts. This was my longest video on the channel yet for a detachment review. Let me know how you like this more long style overview of a detachment. I really like this detachment. It powers up some of my favorite Adeptus Custodes units that sadly were not as powerful as some of my less liked units such as the grav tanks and warden spam. I don't mind 1 unit of wardens, I just didn't like running 2 to 3 units of wardens. The detachment rule is for Custodes and Psychona units, which means I think we will need a dedicated video for our Psychona units in this detachment. If I have missed anything or you have any tips for the detachment, throw it down in the comments. Subscribe for weekly battle reports, list videos, and other Warhammer 40K content. And like always, thanks for watching, thanks for stopping by.